Robin Hood Radio presents Stage Right or Not with Michele Willens. Michele is a longtime journalist and herself is a published playwright of several theatrical works. She's a frequent contributor to the Huffington Post, Daily Beast, and the Atlantic websites.
Well, I am doing this report on Memorial Day, so I am not only looking back on the two performances I saw this past week, but I'm reflecting on the issues inherent in them. Both deal in the dark past and certainly hint at the chaotic current, but they manage somehow to leave us hopeful about the future. Now, let me say up front that only one of these is on a stage for a good length of time, and on a Broadway one at that. The other was essentially a reading by a pair of well-known theater artists. Unfortunately, it was a one-nighter, but these kinds of events remind us to look for similar things in all our neighborhoods. Ultimately, both experiences were about words rather than production, and both were penned by women. Now that I have your attention, the Declaration of Independence made us no longer a colony, but it was the Constitution that made us a country. Which brings me to What the Constitution Means to Me, an autobiographical play by Heidi Schreck. Yes, I'm a bit late to this one, but the show has been nominated for a substantial number of Tony Awards and just missed out on a Pulitzer. Expectations may be unfairly high, and some audience members have said it's overrated, it's better in a smaller house, it goes off on tangents, and so on. But I think most are satisfied with this unique theater-going experience, which is at the Hayes Theater through July, and critics have largely been rapturous. Now, What the Constitution Means to Me is part memoir, part stand-up, and part lecture. Schreck is recalling herself at 15 when she paid her way into and through college, a state school in 30 years ago, she reminds us, by entering American Legion debate contests. That's how she earned her money. Usually they were on the subject of the Constitution. I was a zealot, she confesses. She breaks down the famous work into its amendments and their sections, the 9th and the 14th earning the most attention, and explains the difference between a negative rights and a positive rights document. Who knew? At some point, her younger self leaves us, and she spends most of the rest of the show speaking about sexual violence and male entitlement and all those who should feel protected by the Constitution, but have legitimate cause not to feel that way. Schreck's timing could hardly be more perfect in that her most prominent subject is abortion, just as states are voting to outlaw it all over again. There is also a painfully personal thread throughout about her own mother, grandmother, and even great-grandmother. It gets somewhat lost, but ultimately pays off. The show can get polemical by definition, but there is much humor throughout. It might help if you loved Dirty Dancing as much as she did. And some of the audio segments are so ridiculous as to be funny. Just listen to a couple Supreme Court judges arguing over when the word shall really means shall. The production is too long, by 30 minutes or so. There are gimmicks at the end of the interactive variety, which mostly work, but one wonders how necessary they are. Still, What the Constitution Means to Me is passionate, original, heartfelt, and gives us even more cause to be infuriated. Now, Heidi Schreck certainly could pick up a few Tonys. I'd be surprised if The Ferryman doesn't win for Best Play, unless the voters want to get all patriotic. Do you choose one about our founding document or one coming from a Brit dealing with troubles in Northern Ireland? Schreck herself gives a totally winning performance, but is it acting? I don't know. I was racking my brain to think if someone playing his or herself ever won a Best Acting Tony. Her competition is very stiff. Elaine May is a woman losing her memory. Laura Donnelly in Ferryman, she won that award. She won the award in Britain for the same role. Laurie Metcalf as Hillary Clinton, the popular Annette Bening. All the votes have been cast by now. June 9th is the big night. Anyway, when the theater scene gets a bit quiet, that's when we start seeking interesting theatrical-ish happenings. So last week I hustled to the 92nd Street Y, where two of my favorite actors, Andre Holland and Felicia Rashad, read beautifully from the new collection of Toni Morrison writings. Essays, speeches, eulogies. This was nothing less than magical and a true privilege to hear sentiments such as, A third response to chaos after naming and violence is stillness. A writer's life and work are not a gift to mankind, they are a necessity. Before there is a final solution, there must be a first and a second. What can get worse can always get better. Well, their final reading was about a blind woman and the subject of taking things into our own hands. Well, someone should be writing a play based on that one right now. Hey, if they can make one about the Constitution. By the way, one of the most heartening things about the 92nd Street Y experience was seeing a packed house of largely non-whites. The institution is an historic and constantly exciting place, but the members and audiences are usually heavily white and Jewish. Once again, it just shows if the prices are not ridiculously priced and if the content resonates, they will come. Anyway, my hunch is if you check your local listings, you'll find someone, maybe at a library or a school auditorium, is putting on some kind of performance with music, with beautiful words, old or new. As we speak, my hunch, Jill, is there are many such goings on near you.
Oh, absolutely. And in many communities, I'm always amazed. I mean, here we have the Sharon Playhouse, and they... Yes. It's quite wonderful. Go a little bit further north, and of course you've got all of the Berkshire from Williamstown south. You were up here last.
Yes, I was, and that's already started.
Yeah, and you know how crucial it is to feeding, in fact, Broadway.
Absolutely. You never know where, from a Barrington stage, suddenly it's on, a Broadway stage.
Right. And so,
but there are so many things going on. I have an aunt who, God bless her, is 94 now, lives in Princeton, and she had these shows that she used to write using local actors, and they played in Long Island. They were on the Long Island Library Circuit. I didn't even know there was a Long Island Library Circuit. They were playing every single week. And performing, and locals would come out and watch and sing along and whatever. So, I don't know. I just love that.
These, what I think is, you'll forgive me, crying shame, is that these exist. They just don't get the, sorry, mounting soapbox here. They don't get any, they don't get the press and the exposure that they deserve.
Right.
Because I'm not talking about your aunts, and I'm not talking about the Tonys per se. I'm talking about local venues, community situations that people should go out and see, because, and I'm going to just mildly rant here. People are cackling about the death of local news and so forth. Well, the foolish thing about putting everything, and I always marvel at businesses who choose solely to advertise through social media, is you are only reaching the people who you reach.
Right.
Your friends, unless, of course, it's a major outlet that if you're NBC and you have a social media presence, well, that's fine because you've got multiple other platforms. But if you're just a regular community theater, for example, trying to scratch it out, I mean, unless you have the, in quotes, privilege of trying to put on To Kill a Mockingbird, and Scott Rudin comes along, no one knows.
Oh, only on Broadway, yes.
Right.
For the next 10 years, yes.
But what I'm saying is this whole, we don't need local information is such such defective thinking, and so while at the same time saying, oh, we need more blah blah, it's just it baffles me.
That's right, and communities become, young people who go to their libraries or go to their auditoriums and see they become the theater goers of the future. Then they want to say, hey, Mom, take me into New York.
Take me to the city, take me to this, take me to Chicago, take me to someplace.
Exactly. So, it also breeds a love of, but, community, listen, Richard Nixon met his wife doing they were both doing community theater, very badly, I might say, in Whittier. Apparently he was the worst. Who did he play? Not Iago, somebody, but apparently the worst ever. But that's all right. He met Pat there.
That's
So,
right, exactly. And you don't think about that. And you fast forward in time. That's not the first, even the 12th thing that you think of. But there you go.
and by the way, what the Constitution means to me, that played many places before it came to Broadway. Yes, it played in Berkeley at the Berkeley Rep, which is a very established regional theater. But, it played little theaters here and there before it got here. And, to follow a show, it doesn't just start.
It doesn't spring full-bodied from the head of Zeus on Broadway. What about 1776? Speaking of not full-bodied from the head of Zeus.
I know, and speaking of American history, I read too that's coming, that they're bringing that back, I guess, next season on Broadway. God, it seems like they've tried that many times, and I guess they choose their, when seems to be a good, next year is election year, maybe they're thinking that. I don't know, I can't even remember, I read it.
Diane Paulus is directing, and it's going to debut American Repertory Theater and then an LA engagement.
Is that right? Before New York?
Yep, it's Roundabout. That's why you remember it. Roundabout will partner with American Repertory Theater. Open spring 2021. 2021.
Oh, okay. So we'll already have a new president, or not.
But upcoming subscription season, it will play in Cambridge, May 22nd to June 28th.
Right, that would be Boston, and then to L.A. Well, that's good to hear. See, I always talk about L.A. becoming a real feeder more than ever these days.
Right,
and that, the Temptation show played there first. A lot of shows now have come from L.A.
Well, let's not forget the Old Globe, which is not L.A. but San Diego, which
right.
fed, so much came out of there.
You wonder with something like 1776, whether they change any of the. I assume they don't. They don't go back and rewrite
I hope
it.
not.
They don't.
Sorry, that was just my personal. Sorry. We can cut that out. But no, I'm joking. But it's just history. The evolution of history is as informative and educational as meaning study the warts. Then, boys and girls, try not to repeat them instead of sitting here looking back going, oh, that was bad. No kidding, it was bad. So tear down a statue?
Right. Yeah, if you go see Constitution, we're all given little copies of the Constitution. So I have one here with me to reread. And I'm not giving anything away, but one of the debates, of course, is do we get rid of the Constitution and rewrite a whole new one? That's kind of the final debate of the show. And
let's work on the Magna Carta. After we're done, let's do the Magna Carta, okay?
Let's go back to the Declaration. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, a interesting week.
Stage Right or Not with Michele Willens, produced in the studios of Robin Hood Radio, robinhoodradio.com.